Hello, we are live. Hello, everyone. Excited to be here, trying live streaming out for the first time. Bear with me as we figure this out. I'm just going to take a second and post this link to Twitter so I'm not talking to myself. It seems like a very good idea, if I may say so myself. So give me 1 second. Let's just post this to Twitter. Hold on a sec. Oh, apparently it posted to Twitter automatically, and there I am. Okay, so never mind. We are good to go. Hello, everyone. Excited to be here, trying out this format for the first time. I'm definitely a live stream newbie, so bear with me. There is a comment section here, so I'm going to talk about the things that people asked me to on the Twitter post that I did asking for suggestions. I'll probably go a little off the script as well. But if there are things that you want me to discuss or things that I haven't, you want to go deeper or things that I haven't touched on that you do, let's just put it in the comments and we'll do it live. So to start off, great to be here, everyone. I'm Steven Goldfeder. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Offchain Labs, and super excited to be here. We've been building the blockchain space for a long time. So a little bit about myself. I got into crypto. Well, let's go back. Well, I got into crypto first when crypto didn't mean cryptocurrency. When I first started getting into crypto, that meant cryptography to me. And actually, for a very long time, I was one of those adamant people that are like, crypto means cryptography. I don't know what cryptocurrency is, but it's not crypto. Eventually, I came to embrace that. But I was actually in the summer of 2012, I believe, I did an internship at a cryptography lab in Israel with Yehuda Lindell, really well-known cryptographer who's one of the leaders in MPC, multi-party computation. And that was my first foray into crypto as cryptography. I liked it a lot. I ended up doing graduate work in that field, and first at Columbia in a master's program, and then I joined Princeton, the PhD program. When I got there, my advisor, Arvind Narayanan, said, hey, there's this thing, Bitcoin. We should talk about that. And my story kind of continues from there. Got super interested in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and did a lot of work initially on like securing digital assets. So like MPC or multi-party computation for cryptocurrencies. And then together with Arvind and Ed Felton, my now co-founder, we wrote a textbook on cryptocurrencies. Textbook was written in 2015, published in 2016. It's almost a decade old, but I still think it's the only computer science textbook. It's in desperate need of a revision. So one day when we have time, I will get to that. But that is not something that unfortunately I've had time for yet, but it's definitely on the long bucket list. But never ever expected as a graduate student to be founding a company, or I really always expected to go onto the academic track and be a professor at a university building research that hopefully gets into industry someday. But then it sort of just clicked one day with Ed and Harry and me. We're like, we're building all this cool stuff, and then we're just like sending it off. But like, we believe in this. We should be the ones that actually build this out. We want to build out Arbitrum Tech ourselves. And that's how Offchain Labs started in 2018. For a while, it was me, Ed, and Harry in part-time capacity, turned full-time over time. We raised some money, and then we hired a team. Initially, actually, the team we were hiring was all based in Princeton and New York. And then COVID happened. And all in all, I wish COVID didn't happen. But the one nice thing that happened from a company perspective was we went global in our hiring. And it enabled us to, like, some of our best teammates wouldn't be here today joining us. We would not have accomplished what we've accomplished if we would have kept to the, hey, you have to come in and work your 9 to 5 hours. We were never really 9 to 5. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you have to sort of stay in the Princeton office or the New York office. That was like not something that would have been successful a long time. So we opened up our eyes, and today I think we're about 100 people in roughly 20 countries. So it's super diverse team, geographically diverse as well, and I'm excited to be a part of it. Actually, just a few minutes ago on Twitter, I saw this tweet, which was like, hey, here's what a CEO has to do. I'll just read it out loud. Hang on a second. It was like kind of joking with my Mert, who I actually like a lot. It was like, people think a CEO is really hard, but it's just asking for impossible things for your team and then gaslighting them and for being slow at it, telling Twitter you're about to release something, but your team has no idea what it is, repeating, let's pick up the pace here. So I do none of that. Now, part of the thing is like Off-Chain Labs is my first job. So I was fortunate to have really good graduate and postdoc mentors, and I sort of just copycatted their style, and they were always very collaborative. There was never like, I'm the boss and you're the team. It was like, hey, we're in the trenches together. And that's the way that I say I, but really me, Ed, and Harry run an Off-Chain Labs. Like we are very much in the trenches with the team, figuring out the details. If something goes wrong, we roll up our sleeves. We never point fingers. And I'm not just saying that. That's the way we run the company. And it's the way I would want to be treated if I were working, for someone else. And it's the way that I was treated when I was in my graduate career. And it's the way that we treat people. So I know the tweet was half in jest, but in all seriousness, we often get like people join from other companies like, hey, what's going on here? Like, why is everything so like friendly and egalitarian? That's just the way that we tend to operate things. And the second point is, I'm not sure if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but we have either a great feature or a flaw, you tell me, at Off-Chain Labs where we don't talk about things that we're building until they're actually really de-risked internally and ready, basically. So or enough ready to talk about, ready enough to show the world, and the team knows about it. So definitely you'll never find me talking about something on Twitter that our team doesn't know about. Much the opposite. You'll find something for me about Twitter that our team has known about for months and months and months, and probably frustrated, like, oh, good, Steven tweeted this, so now I can talk about this publicly, legit. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, to be very honest with you, because other teams, and not to say any, this is a good thing or a bad thing about anyone, so it's just different approaches. I feel like talk about things when they're less ready, much earlier on, and it kind of leads us to this weird thing because people have this sort of, people don't say, oh, if Off-Chain Labs is saying this thing, it's probably ready. If this team is saying this thing, it's probably a year away. They just sort of take everything at face value. So you find us like, maybe we should talk about things earlier and get people more excited about them. I don't know. So this isn't like, hey, we're doing something wonderful or great. It's just a fact. This is how we do things. But I'm open to feedback. Maybe we need to start talking about things before they're actually de-risked and ready to get people more excited and really to be able to compete with the narrative that others are creating, in which they talk about things much earlier in the cycle. So, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like a disservice if everyone else is saying, hey, we have this awesome thing, but it's going to be there in a month. And we're like, well, we can't talk about that now because, or this, it's going to be there in a year, but we can't talk about that now because we need 11 more months. And it's like, but everyone else is talking about it. So this is something which we deal with a lot and think about a lot. And I'm really not sure that I'm doing the right thing or wrong thing. But this is how we tend to operate until now. And, we'll figure out if in time, if that's a good thing. We can always adapt. That's the one thing about being in a startup. You adapt. People don't know this, but I'll give you actually two early stories from the startup days, right? You often notice a startup when it's successful and you don't realize like that there were years where that was like completely not sure if that was going to be the case or if it was going to be successful. And, you'd probably think I'm lying if I told you the amount of time that we as an early startup spent on poker. No, you didn't mishear me. I said poker. Because initially we thought L2s are like really cool, but no one's going to use them like unless we push them and show them and teach them. So we were like, okay, let's build a poker app. Actually, this idea came from, interestingly enough, when we were raising our seed round, the really wonderful team at Coinbase Ventures said to us, I think it would be awesome if you guys, did some poker demo, like, where you can, not necessarily for money, but like did some poker demo on layer 2, because, and it turns out, by the way, that besides for the scaling problem, poker is actually a really hard field to build in a blockchain decentralized way. There's academic literature on poker. Part of the problem is what happens if someone backs out of the game. If someone backs out, if you're at a table, you just say to that guy, hey, you can't back out, or you just like give the person a nudge or take their cards back. But like online, someone could just stop responding. So online poker is actually, forgetting about blockchain, a huge topic and how you redistribute cards and how you deal with this. And we initially thought like, okay, here's what you do. You just say they lose and distribute their money. But it turns out that people playing poker don't want to just win. They want to finish the game. So there's actually a really hard academic problem here. So I remember us talking to economists and the like, and us being the researchers we are, Ed, Harry, and myself, were like, let's do some research on poker. So Definitely not something we talked about today or something you'd expect, but we spent a lot of time reading poker papers. Eventually, it became clear to us, particularly as 2020, 2021 happened and people needed our technology. It was like, okay, we don't have to worry about poker. We have to worry about building the infrastructure for everyone else that's building poker and it and all these other applications. So that's what we ended up doing. And but if someone else wants to pick that up, I'd love to see a good poker match on Arbitrum. Another story from that era, actually, which I think illustrates some of the struggles of an early company, which may not be so apparent. Again, you probably just see like, oh, Off-Chain Labs and Arbitrum are successful and they did a great job. It wasn't always the case. So here's one which I don't think I've ever shared publicly before. It was time to raise our Series A. And when I mean it was time to raise our Series A, I don't mean because we decided, hey, we're ready to raise a Series A. I mean because we decided like, hey, we don't have much money left, so we need to raise a Series A. And actually, this was in late 2020, early 2021, when these conversations were happening. Started off in 2020, and there just wasn't that much interest, to be honest, in Off-Chain Labs at the time, and we didn't understand it because our technology, we believed, I still believe, was just far superior. We had Arbitrum on testnet, fully built out in a very early stage, right? It looks nothing like it did today, but it had fraud proofs, that had all the components there on testnet. This was in October of 2020. And they're like, okay, like we should be able to raise, right? We're way ahead of everyone else. And it turns out that like, narratives don't always agree with the facts, or don't always agree with the facts as you see them. Looking back, like I kind of get it, right? You're like, are we really going to fund those guys who are thinking about poker? Like those guys are NGMI. Like I get people thinking that. So like, it's no offense, but that's sort of what we actually dealt with. I remember someone telling me that a friend of mine that was in some Chinese language message boards and told me they call us the professor coin. We didn't have a coin, by the way, at the time, but like the idea was that like, they thought we were too academic, and it's a fair criticism. But anyway, one thing that we realized we had to do along the lines of poker was we have to demonstrate to people that this is great technology that you can use. And so what we did was we created this thing, which we said, okay, we're going to take like every DeFi app that we know of, and we're just going to port them to Arbitrum. And it's super easy. And at the time, Arbitrum was the only chain that was live, but also on testnet, but also the only one that actually said you can like port code wholesale, right? Everyone else wasn't trying for smart contracts, had a custom language, a custom compiler. We were the only one trying. And we really wanted to like get this out to people like, hey, this is something really cool. This is kind of differentiated. You should be interested in this. So we said, we're going to do this thing. Internally, we called it dAppStravaganza, which is like the worst name ever. It's one of those names like you say as a joke, and like you roll your eyes, and then somehow it takes off internally, and every time you see it, you kind of roll your eyes. But that's what we called it, dAppStravaganza. And we started reaching out to teams like, okay, hey, can you go ahead and we're going to do the work for you. We're going to port, we port Uniswap to our to Arbitrum. We called it Arbiswap. We ported Aave. We called it Arbe. We ported MakerDAO. We called it FakerDAO. And we had like, with some teams, they were friendly, but relatively little traction with teams being like, okay, like we're going to own this. We're going to like, from our account, retweet Off-Chain Labs, building Arbe or Arbiswap. It was more like we were doing our own thing. Teams were like, kind of understood, respectful, but not like really engaging. Then we had this like massive win. And the massive win was, and this was like a moment that got everyone so excited internally. We had this massive win where, and this is still a phrase we use today when we have a massive win, which we got BurgerSwap. Yes, we got BurgerSwap. This is like when we have a massive win internally, someone internally will post, we got BurgerSwap. So let me tell the story now. BurgerSwap was a bullish on BurgerSwap. Yes, I see that in the comments. BurgerSwap was a DEX. I think it was on BSC at the time. And a good friend, Ryan Feng was involved, and they agreed to not only, let us port their open source technology, but they were going to put their brand behind it. They were going to say, BurgerSwap is excited to be part of dAppStravaganza, or whatever we ended up calling it externally. I think we called it Arbitrum Rollout, which ended up confusing people because we thought it was cute. Like, oh, roll up, roll out. No one got it. We should have stuck with dAppStravaganza. But anyway, that was like a really, really exciting moment where we got BurgerSwap. And if you look, I guess, back from where Arbitrum is today, right, to that point, you probably think like, oh, that's silly. That's like such a small milestone. Like, so you got BurgerSwap, Big deal. But the answer is like the way I view this journey is one of a staircase where, yeah, when you get to the top of the stairs, the second stair doesn't seem important. And it's like, I could get rid of that second stair, but like, not really, because you would have never gotten to the third stair if didn't have the second stair. Maybe you would have gone to the third stair. If you were missing the second and third, you wouldn't have gone to the fourth, right? Eventually, there would be this big hole in the ground, and you'd have fallen into that hole. And that's how I view this, where you have to realize, where you are at the time, and celebrate the wins from where you are, and keep climbing that staircase. And the wins will get bigger and bigger and bigger, but don't lose sight of the smaller wins that it took to get there. Like, you can't lose sight of that, and you can't appreciate that. And we still appreciate like every little moment that it took to get there. And ultimately, the reason why we're excited about what we're doing is not because we're patting ourselves on the back, because we fundamentally believe that Ethereum is the decentralized smart contract player of the present and of the future. And in order to make sure it remains the future smart contract layer, it needs to keep up with demand. It needs to keep up with, increase its transaction throughput. And that's what we're providing. And that's why we're here. We're very mission driven, and we're excited to be here every single day. And, sometimes it takes steps to get there. You can't go ahead and jump from step 1 to step 100. And when you get to step 100, step 1 and 2 are going to look so silly and like so unnecessary. But ultimately, I think that, for us, that was part of the journey. And the reason I mention this is, again, because I just want to like share a little bit of what it took to get here, and some of the wins and some of the more difficult periods that we as a company, went through. And there was a time, by the way, in that Series A where it wasn't very clear that it was even going to happen. There was definitely an alternative world in which a few things went differently, and people just said, I don't think that Arbitrum technology is going to make it. Like, those people are way too academically focused. And, we persevered, we pushed through, but also we took that feedback. And I think understood. Like, I look back and I say, probably, we spent a little too much time on poker. We were a little too much focused on academic pursuits. And I think some people helped us really understand that and get there and get to the point that we are. That's the point. Like, you can always adapt, right? Startups pivot all the time. People can adapt, people can change, and just not just digging firmly into your roots and your current beliefs, but actually being able to criticize yourself, I think, is important. So one of the questions I always get is, what does Arbitrum think about ZK technology? And my answer is the same. Off-chain Labs, and I don't speak for Arbitrum or Arbitrum Foundation or Arbitrum Technology or Arbitrum DAO, I speak for Off-chain Labs. But what do we think about ZK? Well, I think ZK is a fascinating and very important, technology sphere, and one that should be continued to be developed. In fact, if you look at my academic record, you'll find that I built a ZK proof system when I was at Microsoft, well before I worked on Arbitrum. And that's I've been a big believer in this technology for a long time. Whether I think that ZK proofs are ready for prime time today and can compete with the way that we're building optimistic rollups, that's another question. And currently I don't, but I'm still think they're doing very important work. And then people say, okay, so are you taking a long-term bet against ZK? And the answer is no. One of the things about Off-chain Labs compared to most of our competitors is you don't find the name ZK or Snark or Stark or Optimistic in our name. You find the word Off-chain Labs. What we do is we build technology to take data, to take transaction volume off-chain and scale that way. Now, it could be that eventually, when we want to use the best technology available to do that. Today, I firmly believe that Arbitrum Nitro, from a security, maturity, flexibility standpoint, cost perspective as well, is the best technology to scale Ethereum. But I can promise you that in 5 years from now, there will be something better, whether it's iterative in terms of Arbitrum Nitro improving itself, whether we make some changes that are more fundamental. There will definitely be improvements. That's how technology works, both in academia and in industry. And in a world where we have so many people pouring into our space every day, so many smart people, I would very much hope that in 5 years we make significant progress. And that's why we have to be able to be open to that and to question our beliefs every single day, right? It's not that I believe that Arbitrum Nitro as it exists today will be the exact technology in 5 years from now. I believe that Arbitrum Nitro is the best technology today, and we have a fantastic team and a fantastic community and ecosystem wider than our team that are looking to how to make sure that stays the same. And if it turns out that we have a breakthrough or two, because that's what I believe we need, but others will disagree. But if it turns out that ZK technology becomes feasible, I'd be a proponent for including in the Arbitrum technology. I think, if it can compete with what we're doing today, and they've made wonderful strides, these teams, and really fantastic progress. But I would absolutely say, if I thought it was competitive, that the DAO and the foundation should consider incorporating some ZK technology. That's not where I exist today, but I haven't taken any sort of long-term bet against ZK, because I'm sure whether it's ZK or something else, in 5 years, we're going to make progress. And if you look back, this happened. Take a look at the initial Arbitrum technology stack. Take a look at the Arbitrum technology stack as it exists today. In 2018, when the Arbitrum academic paper was published, the crown jewel was the Arbitrum virtual machine, or the AVM. That was retired in 2021 when Arbitrum Nitro was built. And now, had we called ourselves AVM Labs, that would have been very difficult to do. Had our mission statement included the Arbitrum virtual machine, that would have been a loss. But it wasn't. It was, we want to scale Ethereum. We want to do that with the best technology available. So when the AVM was the best technology available, we used that. And you know what? When we built something that was better than the AVM, we said, goodbye, AVM. I know we spent years of our lives working on that, but we're going to retire that and move on to something. Where did the name of Arbitrum Nitro come from? That's a great question. Nitro was, I believe, chosen or suggested by Harry on our team. And by the way, one piece of record that I should correct is, for some reason, when I ask for comments or questions and topics, people love to ask me about my cat Nola. I don't have a cat Nola. I don't have any pets. That is Harry's cat. So you can thank him for Nola, and thank him for the cat, I should say, and thank him for Nitro, or the name, and actually much of the technology as well. Definitely, if you're going to thank either Harry or myself for Nitro, it's Harry who you should be thanking, and also Lee and the entire backend team there. So that's one thing which I wanted to talk about. Anyway, moving on to some other topics. Again, feel free to keep the questions and comments coming. I'm not looking on Twitter, but I am looking on the StreamYard comments directly. I don't know how you get them here, but there are comments that come up in my screen. So clearly a bunch of people have figured out how to get those there. And I'm definitely monitoring those. Anything about Zai? Zai launched today. Fantastic launch. Really successful team. A lot of excitement around them. Their mainnet went live. I don't think it went live to users yet, but their mainnet is now live on Ethereum today. And that is, they are really, so they're a layer 3 chain. So they're leveraging Ethereum security, but via Arbitrum One. It's a really interesting construction. It's part of the Arbitrum Orbit stack. And I think they are the great poster example of what Arbitrum Orbit can do. Because what you can do basically is, you have a team that's fantastic at something that I'm not fantastic at, and my team is not fantastic at, right? This is a team that's fantastic about building games, building ecosystems, building, successful communities around their games. And that's not something that's my core strength or my team's core strength. And building the underlying technology to enable that is not something that's in Zai's core strength. But together, right, we expose the infrastructure, and we can help them do that, and help them, build their community and build their ecosystem partnerships in a way that leverages both of our strengths. Again, we have really good strengths in technology as well as in ecosystem partnerships and product. They have really, really great strengths in gaming, and we complement each other directly. And I think that's really what Orbit's about. It's like, hey, we don't want everyone to be able to have to go ahead and just reinvent the wheel, right? We can just lend our wheel and say, okay, you guys are much better about building a wagon. We're better at building a car, but you can use our wheel. Sorry, I'm super, super weird with analogies. One thing, if you follow me on Twitter, I might have realized sometimes I take analogies like 1 or 2 or 15 steps too far. So I guess I just did that with the wheel, but hopefully you catch my drift. And just reading the comments here, where did the name Stylus come from? That came internally. I'm not 100% sure where. There was a few people involved in that effort. I think Rachel was involved. I think Andrew was involved in that. I don't know exactly where that came from internally and who suggested it, but it came from a sort of a working group internally. Yeah, that's as far as I know. But anyway, Zai is super excited about Zai's launch. I've known Sobi and Toby for a long time, and incredible team to watch and follow. And I'm excited that they've chosen to build an Arbitrum Orbit. And we've seen the Arbitrum ecosystem success stories on the application layer. And now we're beginning to see with Zai and others that have gone live or will go live, Frame, Kinto, etc. Arbitrum Orbit success stories as well, and it's really really exciting. Today, Zai's had a big moment, and I'm excited for them to continue to succeed in the way that they've been absolutely crushing it over the course of the past weeks and months. Okay, other things that I'm going to ramble on based on some Twitter questions that I've gotten, but again, feel free to ask other things here. How we got started Off-Chain Labs, where it came from. So I guess I covered my personal story a little bit, but I'll just talk about the Off-Chain Labs and the Arbitrum academic story a bit. So this really actually starts before my involvement. It starts with Ed Felton, my co-founder. And Ed had this idea and said, "Hey, let's build. Well, hang on. There was before we built. It was like, hey, there's this thing called Ethereum. There's this thing called smart contracts. Actually, before Ethereum even existed, there's this thing called smart contracts. How do we scale these smart contracts?" And it was clear that from the academic literature, these smart contracts weren't going to scale. So either one or two things were going to happen. Number one was these smart contracts were going to just go away and no one would use them. Or number two is they would get a lot of demand and they would just like the plumbing wouldn't work and it would just be too expensive for people to use and there wouldn't be enough capacity. So Ed was very interested in this from an academic perspective of how do I go ahead and scale smart contracts? And that's basically where the Arbitrum technology initially came from. It was Ed's head and Ed's idea of we need to build something. And if you look back, actually, if you look for the first mention of Arbitrum on YouTube. So when I used to say this piece, I would say, this going back to our Series A raise, I would say, look for Arbitrum on YouTube. You'll find exactly one video. Right today, we're a bit past that, but say if you go back and look for the very first mention, you'll find a Princeton class seminar. And it wasn't with a bunch of undergraduates, a project that Ed led as part of that seminar, where they built out a very early version of Arbitrum, and that's from fall 2014 semester. So Ethereum went live, for the record, in July of 2015. So this was well before Ethereum existed as a blockchain. Ed and some students were already thinking about Arbitrum. Now, what happened with that project at the time? So those students finished their class semester and they sort of went on. And Ed went to the White House. So Ed has a really, really cool resume. I always hate on calls when I'm on the call with Ed and we do intros and I have to go after Ed because he has this like really, really impressive resume and can say like, yeah, I was senior advisor to President Obama and deputy chief CTO of the United States, inaugural CTO of the Federal Trade Commission. So Ed has a really cool resume. But at that point, he actually went to the White House to be the senior advisor to President Obama and deputy CTO of the United States. And he was there for up until the end of the Obama administration. And when he came back to Princeton, the project Arbitrum had just sat there on the shelf. No one really did anything for 2 years or so. And Harry and I went and knocked on Ed's door and said, "Okay, let's go and let's pick this up from an academic perspective." Like it was clear at the time, like things were starting to heat up. 2017, CryptoKitties. We thought we had problems. Right now, if we look back and say, "Oh, if only we can get back to that level of usage and prices, we'd be great." But at the time, it was clear to us that demand was picking up. And we're like, we need to build Arbitrum now. We need to really build this and take those ideas and build it out from a graduate academic perspective. And we did that for in academia for a long time. And we published it eventually, our paper in Usenix Security, which is a top academic security conference, in August of 2018, which is also the month that Off-Chain Labs was founded, because we looked at ourselves at that point and said, this is great. Do we really just want to publish this and be done? Or do we want to actually see this into production? And we said, we really want to build this and put this into production. And that's when, we all had other jobs and other gigs, but we sort of formed the company. Slowly we raised capital and slowly we offboarded off our other obligations and came full-time in Off-Chain Labs and started building a team from there. So that's a little bit of the, I guess, lore of Off-Chain Labs. And again, the interesting thing is we never had a significant pivot as a startup because while the tech has matured significantly since those days, like the core features, the fraud proofs, those are in like the earliest versions of Arbitrum. You can go read that. And actually, in some sense, the interesting thing is the Arbitrum academic paper for 2018 looks a lot more like Arbitrum Orbit than it does a single monolithic chain. So initially, we kind of assumed that there would just be lots of different chains for different purposes. And then we realized the community is not ready for this. Like, we're not ready for this as a community. We need, we're used to Ethereum, these sort of single experiences. We need to build something on Ethereum that replicates that before we start talking about many chains. And now we've sort of gotten back to that vision. So we've had these like minor pivots. We spent a little bit of time in poker, as I mentioned, and pivoted in terms of how we distribute this technology, how we promote this technology, what we need to build in order to get others to use the technology. But the very core of the technology was not something that we changed over time. So pretty interesting from a startup perspective. We had, I would say, micro pivots, but macro, we've been pretty much on a straight shot. That doesn't mean that our technology is at all the same as it was then. It's completely different. I mentioned the AVM, like the crown jewels of back then don't even exist today, but it's been a pretty straight path to get there. One other interesting thing, which we've talked about in the past, but probably new to most of you, is, so what happens? So Ed, Harry, and I built this technology, but we were at Princeton University at the time, and now we wanted to fund a startup. It's just to launch a startup. And even though Ed, Harry, and I were the ones that literally created this technology and thought of it and worked on it, we actually didn't own it because Princeton University owned it, and University Patent Office sometimes like to patent things, and you can license it from them. And so we couldn't just go ahead and say we're building this. It was really the University Patent Office had to give us the Technology Transfer Office had to give us the rights to do that. So we actually, strangely enough, have a license agreement from Off-Chain Labs for this. Again, we've moved well past this technology, but the license agreement is still in effect, where we licensed the technology that we built from ourselves at Princeton, so we could build that at Off-Chain Labs. And it's actually not a very unusual arrangement, but it kind of sounds unusual. So if you haven't done something similar, it probably sounds pretty strange. But one interesting thing is, at the time, the University Patent Office was interested in us doing a patent for this. And we actually, submitted a patent application and did that. But it became very clear to us very quickly that having a patent, it wasn't going to really work well with crypto and the openness and ethos of this community. And it's funny because some of the things that were in that patent are like things that like many of our competitors are using today. And it might have seemed protected, but we were like, we don't really want that. We want others to be able to use this. We want others to be able to build on these ideas. We want to be collaborative. And that's why we actually convinced, really, Ed was talk to Princeton and explain to them that in this space, patents are not actually as the great thing that they are in other technology spaces. And we were able to work with Princeton to abandon the patent application. And that to us is a big win. Again, if you're watching the stream and you've been involved in like a different software company, a different industry, that probably sounds like crazy. Like, you work to get rid of your patent. Like, what are you doing? But that's crypto. That's what we do. And a lot of the ideas that we've built initially that were in that patent are in use in our competitors' technologies today. And I could not be happier about that, because again, our goal here is to scale Ethereum. I have reasons why I think the approach we're taking is the best, but I have a lot of respect for our competitors. That doesn't mean I won't tussle with them when I think that they're doing something wrong, or they won't tussle with me. And if you've been on Twitter for long enough, I'm trying to do a little bit less of this, but it comes up from time to time, and it will come up from time to time. But that doesn't mean that's sort of a zoomed in argument, right? It's like, we are very much focusing on small details. If we zoom out, we're all really aligned in trying to scale Ethereum. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to do this year more, and I hope others will as well, is to zoom out more and to remember that we're all like trying to do the same thing. We have different ideas, and we all influence each other for good. Because I can tell you certainly that like part of these micro pivots, part of them is just being challenged by others. And there's no question that we are better off because we have competitors building on us, building with us, and challenging us and asking us questions. And we as a community reach consensus on points that if it was just one team building without being challenged, might actually be have reached a different conclusion that was a subpar conclusion. Okay, looking at the comments here. So there's some talk about jobs at Off-Chain Labs. Yes, Off-Chain Labs is definitely hiring, and would encourage people to apply. We are hiring for technical roles, non-technical roles. There's a mention here of the copywriter position. The thing that I look for when we hire is just being excited about what we're doing. That to me is more indicative of success than anything else, right? So if you want to join and you're mission driven, you're excited and passionate about what we're building, the other things you can learn. You can, but that's the point that it's hard to learn. If this is going to be just like a 9 to 5 job, I check in and I check out, and I have no interest in what I'm doing, particularly in a remote environment, it's probably not going to be the most successful match. But if you're excited about scaling Ethereum, if you're excited about Arbitrum technology, there's a very good chance that you'll do quite well here. And even if that means you have some learning to do, that's sort of the core thing, which I think is the hardest to pick up, but the sort of most indicative of success. In the original USEX paper, was there any reason why a bisection game was used? Yes, the bisection game is used today, and it's used in the initial USEX paper because it was we still believe that these interactive fraud proofs, as we now call them, is the best way to scale. And but I think there's a clarification compared to asking the single line fault to be explicitly shared immediately. Okay. Some history there. Great question. So when you build optimistic rollups, there are 2 approaches you can take. And if you go back to 2019 or 2020, there were 2 teams building optimistic rollup taking these 2 different approaches. Approach number 1 was what we did, which was these interactive fraud proofs. Approach number 2 was something called one-shot fraud proofs. Now, I don't want to lose everyone, so I'm just going to explain it very briefly. The idea is that you have some disagreement and on what happened in the chain, and you have like an interactive process to get to this agreement, or you just say, hey, let's just like run the whole thing, and we'll just like run the whole transaction or run the whole block on chain. We don't need to go back and forth. The way Arbitrum does, it takes a really large dispute, and via an interactive process, it narrows it down to a small dispute. And the nice thing about that is you can actually do things like have a really, really, really large disputed area and conveniently and efficiently get it down to a small dispute. So we can argue about blocks and hours long of computation on chain. And all that we need to do on chain is a bunch of bisections and a really small transaction. Whereas if you say, okay, instead, why don't you just run the whole disputed area on chain? Well, you can't run the whole disputed area on chain if it's like an hour-long computation. It means that you have to have really small chunks, and you have to basically pre-bisect. So rather than every transaction or 2 or 3 or 10 or block, you have to basically include these checkpoints. And that's actually very expensive. But it turned back in 2019, this was a big debate that we had, and we were building these interactive fraud proofs. The Optimism team was building these one-shot fraud proofs they call the OVM. And fast forward to today, their approach required you to have a custom compiler. It didn't have the Ethereum equivalents that we had. And fast forward to today, I think all optimistic rollup teams have come around to consensus on this point. And this is one of the points where we all work together and we have debates, and sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. This is one where Arbitrum definitely came ahead as the viewed as correct in consensus, that the interactive bisection game is the correct one because it allows you to be much more flexible. It allows you to get rid of these custom compilers. It allows you to get rid of these pre-bisection points, which is more efficient and flexible and worked in practice. And this actually, that you ask about it, this was literally the topic of that patent. It was using bisection games for a rollup. And had we gone down that path, we would have, you might think, oh, well, everyone has consensus now. You would have been the only ones that were able to do that. So there was a viewpoint of that, but I think ultimately I'm happier that the Optimism team and others are free to use that technology. Even if there are competitors, I think that we made the right decision by not pursuing a patent there, because it was a patent that we never really wanted, and a patent that I think would have been against the ethos of crypto. So ultimately, I am very happy with that choice. Okay, I think we got to most of the comments. I'll probably go for another 15, 20 minutes here. So just a few other topics that came up on Twitter. So Orbit versus other stacks chain. So I had this tweet yesterday where I talked about one of the killer features of Arbitrum Orbit. And here's what it is. The idea is that if you are a new chain, someone wants me to say, okay, there we go. If you are a new blockchain and your transaction volume is not consistent, you're going to have times where you have lots of transactions coming very, very quickly. And you're going to have times, maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour, where you don't have actually very many transactions at all. And this could be problematic, because if you have fixed block times. What does that mean? If your chain is making blocks every, say, 2 seconds, so every 2 seconds, your chain needs to make a block, whether it has transactions or not, you're going to have a big problem because you're going to have lots of empty blocks. And these empty blocks aren't free. They get posted to Ethereum. There's data involved with them. There's system transactions involved with them. So even though there's no user transaction, the system creates a transaction. Often that's the case that works in Arbitrum and other stacks in every block. And you really don't want empty blocks because it just leads to less efficiency. Also, so you might say, okay, so why don't you just make your blocks like less frequent, like spread the blocks out more, have fewer blocks? The problem then is that your finality is really long. So you say, okay, just do a block every 10 minutes. But then if there are lots of transactions, it's bad too, because you have to wait 10 minutes for your thing to get into a block. The best approach, and this is what we do in our Arbitrum Orbit stack, is have elastic block times, which means if transactions are coming in quickly, make the blocks really quickly. If there's 10 minutes that a transaction, don't have any blocks. And this gives you what I believe to be the best of both worlds. And that's what we actually have in our Arbitrum Orbit. And if you're a chain that doesn't know what your usage is going to look like, it's a really great feature, one that you can take comfort in, because you're not going to be paying for empty blocks. You're not going to be like submitting these empty blocks to Ethereum and having to pay for those. You know that like if there are no transactions, we just won't create a block, and you don't have to worry about this cost of these fixed block times. You also don't have to worry about, okay, I'll make these fixed block lengths long and then user experience will be bad. No, it's like elastic. It will adapt to the use of the chain, and this is how Arbitrum Orbit works. But if I'm going to be honest, this wasn't a feature that we designed with Arbitrum Orbit in mind. This was a feature that we designed as part of Arbitrum Nitro, and has some benefits there, again, by getting faster when transactions are better. But like in a chain like Arbitrum One, you don't have like periods of time without transactions, so this doesn't really come up. So it was almost like a lucky accident. We didn't realize when we designed this, to be very honest. Like I could sit here and say, yes, we're geniuses, like we figured this out, we knew it. No, really, we didn't realize the importance of this. It was something we designed for other reasons, and it turned out to be super, super, super important for Arbitrum Orbit chains, because it allowed them to not be wasteful and be maximally efficient, and also give a maximally great UX, right? So it's the crossing point between great UX, because you have fast block times when you need them, at the same time, max efficiency, because you're not posting empty blocks and only posting blocks when you need them. And it turned out to be a great feature. And I think I've learned yesterday in response to my tweet that other stacks are looking to build this as well. So I gave an example in my conversation about a chain called the Public Goods Network. There's an OP stack chain that does these fixed block times, that they had roughly 8 million and change blocks, but only 500,000 or so user transactions, and just a lot of wasteful empty blocks. And I knew that there was something happening, but I also, people pointed out some specific work where the OP team is working to actually fix this. And again, making it more similar, as I understand, to Arbitrum Orbit's design, where you won't pay for these empty blocks. I think there will still be some differences, so I'd love to learn more about that. But that's one thing when it comes to Arbitrum Orbit, which I think is a killer feature. The other thing is just layer threes. There's a lot of, I don't want to say FUD out there, but I guess I just did, about layer threes. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it worth layer two? Here's what I like to think about layer threes. So even if you in the Arbitrum stack where you're not posting empty blocks, you still need to post blocks to Ethereum. And there's a fixed overhead for every block, right? It just costs money. Every block costs money. And if you have a few transactions, like only 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, the overhead's going to be large. If you're like Arbitrum One, where you have like hundreds or thousands of transactions in each of these batches, like the overhead is in the noise. It doesn't really matter. It amortizes out. But if you're a low usage chain, even if you don't have empty blocks, because Arbitrum Orbit guarantees that, if you have relatively empty blocks, right, blocks with a few transactions, it's just going to be expensive because the overhead is going to matter. If you're paying a couple of dollars or so or more to Ethereum every time you post a batch, it's going to start to add up. And that's where layer threes, I think, really shine, because the analogy, and again, here I am in analogies. I particularly use car analogies, by the way. You'll find this on Twitter, car, engine. So let's go with a transportation analogy. If you're a layer two, you're in a car, you're in a car. And you have to basically drive your car in the highway and pay the toll in your car. And even if there's one person in your car, you have to pay that. But if you're a layer three, you're not going over the bridge. You're not going through the toll by yourself. You're going on the bus. And if you have 1 or 2 transactions, that's okay, because you're going to be batched up with Arbitrum One transactions and other layer threes as well. You're all going to go together, and the cost is not going to be amortized over just your transaction. It's going to be amortized over everyone else's as well, and you'll get those low costs. And the other really nice thing about layer 3s is low onboarding costs. Let's say you keep your funds in Coinbase or Binance or some other exchange. If you want to get to your chain, well, presumably on day 1 or 2 or 3, you're not going to have lots and lots of exchange integrations to your chain. Meaning Coinbase is not going to say, okay, this chain is live, let's go ahead and enable deposits and withdrawals. That takes a lot of times if it ever comes, right? Arbitrum One, though, already has all those exchange integrations. So if you build on top of Ethereum, what's the path? You have to go from Ethereum to from Coinbase to Ethereum, and then from Ethereum to your chain. Those are 2 transactions. If you build on top of Arbitrum One, you have to go from Coinbase to Arbitrum One, and then from Arbitrum One to your chain. Also 2 transactions. But in the first case, you have 2 Ethereum transactions. In the second case, you have 2 Arbitrum transactions. And if the cost of Arbitrum transactions compared to Ethereum is 90+% lower, your onboarding cost is going to be 90+% lower. So one of the things that new chains have to think about is, how do I get users on my chain? How do I onboard them? And if we can lower onboarding costs by 90+%, I personally think that's a very big win. And that's one of the other core features that I'm a big fan of when it comes to the Orbit stack. I'm talking like a lot here about tech because those are the questions that I'm getting. But if there's any other questions you want, it doesn't have to be about tech. This is like a Steven stream, not an Off-Chain Labs or Arbitrum stream. So I tend to devolve into tech especially when asked, but even when not asked. But if someone wants to, give me other questions and the like please shoot them at me. I'm super happy to talk about non-technical things as well, like the weather. We're having a big storm here today. Apparently, I'm in the Northeast, and apparently we're going to get really, really rocked by flooding. So if you're also, please stay safe out there. Happy to talk about the weather or anything else, but for now, I'll take the next question, which was about data availability layers. Yeah, so this is another thing I stepped into over the weekend, and basically there's a proliferation of data availability layers out there. And I think it's great. And actually, the Arbitrum was one of the first chains to play with alternative data availability. So what does that mean for those not sure? A rollup posts all transaction data to Ethereum. That's actually the driving cost of a rollup. It's not the computation, it's the data. And if you can take the data off Ethereum, you can lower the cost a lot. Now, there are 2 approaches. This is like the big thing, like get the cost of data lower. There are 2 ways to tackle this problem. There's one, which is like, okay, make the cost of posting data on Ethereum lower. This is like the direction of EIP 4844, which is let's make the cost of posting data lower. And therefore, if data is a large cost driver, if you make the cost for each byte of data lower, you have lowered your cost. And the other approach is put less data on Ethereum. And we can do this with things via compression, which is we do today in the Arbitrum stack, right? So we don't just take the transactions and put them on Ethereum. We really worked well to optimally or close to optimally, as close as we can get, to compress these transactions. So we put less data on Ethereum. But then there's these alternative data availability ideas, which says to go beyond compression. Actually, just don't put it all on Ethereum. Put it somewhere else. When you do that, compression doesn't hurt security because you still have full security. You just have to decompress, but all the data is fundamentally there. It's all decompressible. You don't lose any data. It's all on Ethereum. When you start putting data elsewhere, then the security assumptions have something else, right? You have to not only assume the correctness of Ethereum and that there's someone honest in the world, which is like the optimistic rollup assumption. You now also have to assume that the data is available. And where is the data stored? If it's on Ethereum, you don't have to worry. It's the same assumption. You're already assuming Ethereum will give you what it needs. But if you're adding a different data availability layer, you now have to, in your security assumption, assume that. So Arbitrum was one of the first chains to incorporate in its ecosystem. Sorry, not Arbitrum One puts all data on Ethereum, and personally, I think it always should. But Arbitrum Nova, which is a second chain of the Arbitrum ecosystem, which is really targeted at gaming and social applications and mass market, doesn't put all that data on Ethereum. It uses what's called a data availability committee. Data availability committee is a really innovative design because it's very simple design, but it gets you a lot of mileage out there because it has a really nice property, which is you can have a data committee that's really, really large, like or small, doesn't matter, but the number of honest nodes doesn't scale with that committee. So no matter how many people you add, all you need is 2 honest nodes in the committee, 2 nodes to do the right thing, and then the whole system will work. So it's a really elegant design. that Arbitrum AnyTrust has. But anyway, going beyond Arbitrum AnyTrust, there's now a proliferation of data availability solutions out there, right? There are some wonderful teams. There's Celestia, of course. There's EigenLayer. There's Espresso. By the way, shout out to Espresso. I didn't really get to shared sequencing today. Maybe I'll get there, but we're doing a lot of work with them on building out decentralized shared sequencing that's compatible with Arbitrum chains, and very excited about that. I guess I'll have to stream again to go deeply into that. But just wanted to shout that out. But anyway, there are a lot of different data availability layers out there. And I think one thing that we have to do as a community is to educate people, because it's going to get confusing very quickly. It's like, okay, I can build a roll up on this stack. It can be a layer 2. It could be a layer 3. I can have data availability on Ethereum. I can have it on Arbitrum. I can have data availability on Celestia, on EigenLayer. I can use data availability committee. Who should be on my data availability committee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? This can get very, very confusing very quickly. So I think one thing we need to do as a community is get consensus on what is good for different applications. So what do I mean by that? Well, one of the questions that people had for me when we launched Arbitrum Nova, which is, how could you launch Arbitrum Nova? How could you launch a product that doesn't have data availability on Ethereum? Isn't this like sacrificing, some of the security? And the answer is like, Arbitrum One is still there. For those that can afford the security, they should keep it. Right? For DeFi applications, that a 10-cent fee is fine for them, or a 5-cent fee is totally fine for them. They belong on Arbitrum One. That's maximal security. We're not pulling people off of Arbitrum One. We're not encouraging people to leave Arbitrum One and go to Arbitrum Nova. Arbitrum Nova is there for a different reason, because what was happening in practice is, and this is another place where like you have to be practical and not stand on your like academic values always, which is what's happening in practice is people aren't saying, okay, Steven said I should stay on Arbitrum One, so I guess I'm going to stay there and I'll build my game there. People are saying I can't build my game in Arbitrum One. Like 5 cents, 10 cents, just too expensive. I just can't build the game. So I have two choices. I'll shut down, or I'll go to a different chain, alternative layer 1, which has much worse security than what we're going to offer when you get an Arbitrum or Ethereum. And our question was, okay, is there a way that we can, these people aren't choosing between Arbitrum One and something else. They're going to alter L1s, and they're going to have worse security. So can we go ahead and offer them something that still leverages Ethereum in a very significant way, but also gives them a lower cost by adding a data availability committee? So adding an additional assumption, but still leveraging Ethereum. And our answer was yes. And that's the mindset which you have to take with these things, which is not like, okay, but we have to, no, it's like, and Vitalik actually put out a post recently, which he was like talking about different solutions. And one of the sort of questions which he forked on was, how important is security to you? And that's an important question. We don't need to be like, okay, everyone should use Ethereum, everyone should use Arbitrum One. It's like, no, there are certain applications that it makes a lot of sense for. There are other applications like gaming and social applications where, paying 5 cents every time you do an interaction, or 10 cents every time you do an interaction in an on-chain game, like, it's just not practical. And you have to be pragmatic here and say, okay, so I can offer them nothing and they'll just go elsewhere to objectively less secure solutions, or I can offer them something that is very good. Maybe not quite as good as a roll-up, but it will actually offer them something that's overall better, and they'll be able to use it. And that's the pragmatic approach that we take here. I'm just going to look at the comments here, see if there's anything else. In the long term, will major roll-ups see transaction costs dominated by DA call data? I think data is definitely the cost driver today. I can't comment for exactly the what future innovation will be, but I imagine that that will go down. Certainly with the EIP 4844, we have other longer innovations in that line that will help as well. So I don't know what will happen in the very long run, but it's a point of active research, a point of active development. And by the way, we at Offchain Labs are contributing significantly to that via Prism. So Prism is the L1 team inside of Offchain Labs. They're well known for building the Prism client, but they're also very much involved in all of this as well, and all of these in EIP 4844 development, and really every layer 1 feature development. Just going to take the last few questions here. So AI and ARB, or AI and blockchains, this is a very interesting question. And I'll tell you my answer, which is the thing that I haven't talked about at all, which is actually surprising. I talked about Stylus actually in terms of the name, but what is Arbitrum Stylus? Arbitrum Stylus is this amazing thing, which I don't have enough time to cover. It's this amazing thing that allows you on the Arbitrum chains to write code in Rust, C, and C++, and future other WebAssembly languages today. Again, we don't talk about things that are hyped. This is on testnet today. The code is public. You can go, you can look at it, you can try it, you can see the benefits that you get from using Arbitrum Stylus. Why do I mention this for AI? Because there are a few different ways to view Stylus. Number one, it's actually just a scaling solution, because it turns out that if you use Stylus, your computational cost will go down by 10x. Your at least, and your memory cost will go down by 100x. So you just get a 10 to 100x cost reduction for everything but data, which you just get for using Stylus, and it's a fantastic scaling solution. But there's actually more than that. It also enables you to build in other languages, and that means developers that know other languages can use this now. Now, that's not to me the biggest sell, because a good developer can probably pick up Solidity. It's not like, if they're a great C and C++ developer, I don't think the barrier to them building an Arbitrum is that they can't pick up Solidity. It does allow you to innovate faster, but it's not like necessarily the biggest sell. But the other thing that it allows you to do is to actually bring in libraries, existing libraries in other languages. And that's where I think when it comes to advanced cryptography and AI, this is going to be extremely, extremely valuable to be able to bring in existing AI libraries, machine learning libraries, and innovate on chain in a way that you just can't do in the EVM, because the scalability is not there and the code doesn't exist, and you have to start from scratch. Now you're getting a 10 to 100x boost in scalability, and you're also getting library support. So I think it's going to be absolutely incredible for innovation. Like everything else, I like to build infrastructure. What people do and how they use AI, I'm going to sit back and watch, but we're going to build the tools that allow people to do that on chain. I only have about 1 minute left here, so unfortunately, I'm going to have to get to most of these last time. I'll just end with this last one, which is, can you talk a little more about shared sequencing? Yes, I mentioned before that we're working with Espresso Systems and building decentralized and shared sequencing. Shared sequencing is an really interesting part of the design space to explore, which is what can you do with two chains that have share a sequencer, that they are sequenced by the same chain, by the same person or the same entity. And that sequencer can do things like say, hey, I'm only going to introduce this transaction in this chain if I include this one in this chain. And depending on the guarantees you get, you can actually build like conditional inclusion, which can help you with primitives like bridging and the like. It's a little too much more to get into detail today. And another interesting question is, how does this jive with something else we didn't talk about today? Wow, the hour really flew by. How does this jive with time boost and ordering policies for incorporating MEV into the chain? And that's a fantastic question, but something else which our team is doing a lot of research on, which is time boost, ordering policies that allow for the chain to internalize more value from MEV. Anyway, I need to run, unfortunately. I'm sorry, but I have a hard stop at 2:00 Eastern time. And I want to, though, thank everyone for coming today. This was fantastic. We got a little technical. I tried to start off non-technical. We got a little technical there, or maybe a lot of technical. Please, I'm going to do this again, and happy to do it regularly if there's interest. But please do go ahead and share with me questions ahead of time. Again, they don't have to be technical. They can be completely non-technical. I want to sort of answer whatever questions are on your mind. And thank you so much for coming. And I'm super looking forward to do this again soon. Until next time, see ya. And stay warm, everyone, especially if you're in the Northeast and dealing with this weather today.